On the American agenda tonight, the topic is money, dollars and rubles. Before Mr. Gorbachev cut short his visit, the high point of his day was to have been the opening of a Soviet trade fair here in New York City. The very idea of a Soviet trade fair in the West, let's call it the hard currency zone, is one example of a particular need the Soviets have if they are to develop further and faster. In order to do that, the Soviets must increase their foreign trade. As Alan Frank reports, they would dearly love to do so with the United States.
At about the time Mr. Gorbachev was deciding to cut short his trip, Soviet fashion models were rehearsing for the opening of the Soviet Trade Fair in New York. The Soviets are trying very hard to increase trade with the United States. So far, perestroika has not put more goods on the shelves or shortened lines at the store. So Gorbachev must sell goods to the West and get loans to finance trade. And he needs more Western investments and joint ventures in the Soviet Union. To do all this, he would like the United States to ease restrictions against trade and lending with the Soviets. What's in it for the United States? For starters, American politicians would like to see Soviet military strength reduced even more than Gorbachev proposed on this visit.
Our interests are that the Soviet Union spend less on guns and more on butter. The litmus test will really be the extent to which they come forward, reduce their military budget.
There are also hard economic reasons that make trading with the Russians difficult. The ruble is practically worthless outside the Soviet Union. Because Soviet products are so limited and have such a bad reputation, they haven't been able to earn much hard cash.
This year, the Soviet Union is expected to have total hard currency income of somewhere between $30 to $35 billion. That's probably going to be less than 1/3 of General Motors' total sales this year.
The Soviets now pay Western producers in dollars or gold for a few goods like wheat. Mostly they barter. For example, PepsiCo barters Pepsi for vodka, which it sells in the United States. But not every company can be paid in vodka, caviar, or furs.
It requires some flexibility to determine how to get paid. And that's what the businesses have to develop, is some way to get paid.
Still, with all the political and economic problems, the Soviet Union, with 280 million people and enormous natural resources, is an irresistible market. It is no accident that at the Soviet Trade Fair this week, the most impressive machinery was developed by a West German joint venture with the Soviets.
When I go to Moscow, what I see is Germans, French, Italians, Japanese.
The whole world looks at the Soviet Union as potentially the second biggest market in the world.
It seems to me the only thing that limiting non-strategic trade, of course, I'm talking about, what the Soviet Union will do is cost the United States jobs and businesses in a very competitive world trade situation.
The conciliatory announcement by Gorbachev yesterday will only increase pressure to open trade with the Soviets. Still, there's concern about making Gorbachev's life too easy.
I don't think we should kid ourselves that perestroika automatically means a more benign, inward-looking, and peaceful Soviet Union. We've got to pull this together and ensure that we are supporting the more peaceful commercial aspects of perestroika, but avoiding the financing of activities that are harmful to us.
The American policy debate will not be about whether we should trade with the Soviets. It will focus on whether we can use increased trade to win concessions on reducing their military spending and improving their human rights policies. Alan Frank, ABC News, New York.
And so if it seems a bit obvious, if the Soviets want to improve their chances of selling to America, their first step must be to improve the quality of their products to make them acceptable to American consumers. We'll have our final story in just a moment.
Tonight on Nightline with Ted Koppel, one extraordinary day, the Armenian earthquake, a midnight press conference, Gorbachev's early farewell, and tonight a Reagan News conference.
Finally here this evening, preserving the relics of roadside America. We suspect there are many Americans who do not remember what it was like to drive through this country before there were interstates. why there were many things along the way that made roadside America really worth preserving. Here's ABC's Chris Bury.
It was a landscape formed by generations on the move when average Americans first bought cars and hit the highway. To get noticed at more than 50 miles an hour, roadside architecture had to scream for attention. Pieces of it survive. Giant donuts, concrete hot dogs, even huge hats and boots to match. Mobility was the message. Drive in, drive out, drive on. The designs were garish and gaudy maybe, but now they are mostly gone. Architect Mike Jackson heads a group trying to save what's left.
These things are disappearing as fast as we speak. We're looking at a lost culture, a lost civilization of some ways, the lost culture of the road.
This classic 1940 gas station near Boston will soon be bulldozed for a hotel. On Long Island, a campaign is underway to save the Big Duck. Built in 1931 to sell duck eggs, it is America's original giant roadside object. Some historians are so concerned about saving these roadside relics that museums are beginning to collect them as if they were treasures of some ancient civilization. At the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit, a new exhibit celebrates the icons of the open road.
This is a 1946 diner.
It was saved from the scrap heap and restored. On the jukebox, Glenn Miller. On the menu, bacon and eggs, 35 cents. There is an entire 1937 Texaco station, the only surviving Holiday Inn sign of its kind, a fully furnished room as it was in 1965, and of course, America's historic arches.
Sometime in the 25th century, they're going to look back and there's going to be a few of these things around to say, this was what America was like.
For generations weaned on anonymous interstates and fast food, the old roadscape is fast becoming ancient history, and examples of America's highway architecture may soon survive only as artifacts in a museum. Chris Bury, ABC News, Detroit.
And that's our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Have a good evening and good night.